I think we have a quorum. Madam Clerk, if you can, call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy.
Here.
Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis.
That was present. Very quiet present.
Alderman Kotar.
Here.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley.
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Present.
Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
8 present. We have a quorum.
What we're proposing to do today, we have a number of board bills before us, and I believe most of them are fairly routine. However, we want to, and they're either by myself or other committee members, with the exception of some projects in the 6th Ward, and I received an email from the Alderwoman from the 6th asking us to be patient with her, as she'll be here but be running late. So what I thought we would do today is begin. We have been talking about incentive reform, and part of the process that was outlined when we did our incentive study was doing a better job of collecting information and beginning to try to understand and use that information to guide us as we begin developing a policy. So we've been working on this for a while, and we've taken some, I think, important steps, but we have a tremendous way to go on incentive reform. And to that end, I am grateful that our colleague from the 16th Ward has has agreed to or volunteered to take up this effort. And he's been working with our new financial analyst here at the board, and together they're trying to pull together some of the salient features. And what I thought was we would spend a few minutes at each of our meetings at the beginning, while we have a good group here, to go through this and try to isolate some of the issues, and perhaps we want to be inclusive in our decision making, so we can go ahead and have some discussion on committee about which of these that we should pursue. It is going to be a long process collecting these things and getting them to the point where we're going to be, where they'll be useful for us in the decision making format. So with that introduction, our colleague from the 16th has done a fair amount of work along with our able-bodied financial analysts down here, and they've got to the point where they felt it was appropriate to come back, share, and I think we're going to try to have a brief discussion at the end of this on where they should go next. So Alderman from the 16th, if you could lead us in this discussion.
Sure. I like me a good podium. Chairman is okay.
Please do.
Okay. So thanks for that frame and setting that up, Mr. Chairman. So members of the committee, if you recall, if we go to slide 2, please, Terrence, we sort of started session in this committee with an existence statement. The chairman explained what our rules dictate, or what our rules say who we are as a body in the committee, and that is that we shall consider all matters pertaining to housing, urban development, zoning, including all matters pertaining to community development, the Community Development Agency Commission, SLDC, and the appropriation disbursement of all federal monies administered by said agencies. Now that reads like sort of a very ruly parliamentary order, but I think what we extrapolated out of that was that this committee also has a mission statement back in April, and we decided that the mission statement is really the facilitation of urban development projects that both sustain the economic viability of the city and hope to improve the quality of life of citizens. And we tried to say, well, we need to measure those. We need to have metrics that indicate whether or not we're performing, or indicate whether or not we're tracking these appropriately and that we're succeeding. And I think in a broad way, we sort of said there are two main performance metrics that we should look at. The buckets, one bucket being, that economic viability of the city, and let's work with the city budget's office and the revenue that the city collects under its tax structure and how that grows, which would certainly be economic viability of the city. And then further, how do we work with various public and private data sources as well as external and internal partners in the city to achieve if we're moving the needle, or what barometer we put next to quality of life, citizen quality of life in the city. So slide 3 just very quickly says we need, obviously, to identify performance measures, and that's a theme that I think the chairman and others through incentive reform and the resolution we adopted is the next step. We sort of have the guideline on a very project-specific we have guidelines from a very project-specific order of operations, but now it's time to decide. Let's lay those projects and the incentives that we approve here next to the performance measures. And what are they? So let's have that conversation as a body. Let's have that conversation as a board of aldermen in the city. And again, so the two main buckets here: economic viability of the city, as well as how do we evaluate citizen quality of life. So just very quickly, this is nothing profound, but I think it's sometimes good to get back to sort of elementary basis on what happens. So revenue via taxes, right? The goal should be to grow the revenue, and how do you grow a revenue? I mean, again, without this becoming a macroeconomics lecture, this is a discussion. So stop me at any time and let's have a conversation or clarification. We need to grow revenue, so we do that. And in the event that we're growing revenue, how do we spend said revenues to achieve that citizen utility? So let's first take a quick just look at revenue, and this is something that Dr. Hollins, financial analyst, and I, and Paul Payne, and the chairman, are going to look at. Here's a quick snapshot of the city's revenues. And I didn't have time, but I think it's appropriate for us also to work with Mr. Payne on the revenue growth and what have been the revenue trends over the last 10 years and to date, and to see where that snapshot brings us. So again, I lumped together earnings and payroll, so it's clear by this quick pie chart that there's three main sources of revenue, which I think is no surprise to everyone. So slide 4 kind of says, here's how we understand those. Or slide 5, I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. Right, so no surprise. Property tax, earnings and payroll, and sales tax are sort of the big three. And if we go back to our econ lecture days, right, we know that revenue, in order to grow revenue, being the goal, it's either we increase the base or the rate. All things being equal, one needs to grow in order for us to have more revenue. And then, of course, how we utilize that revenue in that quality of life impact. So the next slide. This is really for the edification of the chairman, because I know he likes charts and numbers. So sorry that one's black, but these are hockey sticks here, right? This is just a very quick illustration, pictures 1,000 words with me, that we either have to grow the rate or the base in terms of growing revenue to have that economic viability. So the next slide really, you see where I'm going here. These are really the three, I think, and Mr. Hollins, and this is where the discussion can happen. These are really the three main performance measures around the economic viability of the city bucket. So when we're talking about projects put next to these revenue streams, are they growing? Are they performing? And we keep peeling the onion back a little bit, but these appeared to, at least at first discussion, to be the three main performance measures around the economic viability of the city, right? Are we growing revenue? And then, Dr. Hollins, if you want to come up, the next slide, this is really something that really Gerard put together on he and I sat down and tried to just think of as many performance measures when we're talking about citizen quality of life. And this is where I think we are really looking for a lot of input from the committee on are there others and what are we missing? Because this is really the bucket that I think is important and can get a little complicated when we put the backdrop of all of the projects or incentives are used next to these metrics. So Mr. Hollins, if you maybe just talk about how we kind of came up with these and why these are appropriate.
All right, thank you. Good morning. So these economic indicators are indicators that I used out in Los Angeles as part of the public finance group for Los Angeles County. And in Los Angeles County, we track them at two levels, at the county-wide level and at the city level, to look for economic trends that were happening at the city level and across the county. Here in St. Louis, it's important to look at these economic indicators at two levels. One at the citywide level, and most importantly, at the neighborhood level. As we all know, development happens block by block at the neighborhood level. And to really understand what's happening in our neighborhoods across the city, we need to really understand, thank you, we need to really understand what the economic picture of every neighborhood is, and really drilling down at the most important level, at the household level. So what is the average household income in every neighborhood? What is the average household size? What is the average median value in every neighborhood? What are the poverty levels across every neighborhood? And looking at those trends over a 10-year period on a rolling basis every year, and coupling that, looking at the actual economic or development activity in those neighborhoods, you'll get a picture of how those development activities are impacting that neyborhood. We will see signs of gentrification. We will see signs of improvements in households. For example, you can look at, a trend of moving from an area that has primarily rental units to owner-occupied units. Generally, owner-occupied units have more stable households. And so by tracking this data and then coupling that with looking at the incentives and economic activity that's happening in our neighborhoods, we will get a true picture of really what's happening and how we're impacting those neighborhoods. And most importantly, we'll identify trends that, one, we may want to spread throughout the city, and two, the trends that are troubling that we may want to address.
So this is a robust list, but I also think that it can grow and it can be codified. And then I think I would ask this committee to help us sort of rank what we feel are sort of the most important measures here and metrics, both in the economic viability of the city, but also more importantly, the citizen quality of life performance measures. And one idea that we had, and on the next slide, is we're going to need some help. And here are the data sources potentially and our partnerships that exist. And some of this information is probably readily available as we speak, and I think is nothing profound. We kind of know a lot of it, where we can go to get some of it. But here was a slide that I think just indicates here are some of the partnerships I think we can forge, not only to help us, but that also collect this data and have it aggregated in some form or fashion already. So one of the big ones, I know we get a lot of our citywide data from the Federal Reserve and sort of the studies they do year over year. I'm not sure if they have a lot of neighborhood level data. I do know that, it's worth saying, I think the city is the only kind of entity that breaks things down on a ward basis. Everyone else tries to look at either a census tract or neighborhood level in terms of their information. And one that I know, I'll just note that comes out to me that was in the list on the previous slide was some of the action items or calls to action from the Forward to Ferguson report that was done. And I have a copy of this here, and I'll get to it in a later slide of how we want to continue to go forward and who we may want to invite to come to give us more information on these performance measures and where we can have those collaborative conversations. But there are a good amount of sort of calls to action or indicators that Forward Through Ferguson suggests we need to track, and they also assign an accountable entity. So that's some food for thought on a potential start or next step too, in terms of partnerships to really try to achieve what we're doing here. The next slide really sort of says, okay, well now how do we analyze this? Assuming we accomplish the feat of going to all of those entities or going to where the heck we need to go to get the information. what's the best way to organize it. And this is where I think we're really going to rely on our man here, Dr. Hollins, to help us put it in a systematic way that tells us something, right? That tells us something. So I think a start to this is, well, we know we need to go get the data, and we need a list of the incentive projects to date, and we need to make sure that we have codified performance measures, both the economic viability of the city bucket and the quality of life bucket. So it feels appropriate to have a list of all the projects that we've received public assistance and have those analyzed against our performance measures. And then so that we're not cratering people with data and spreadsheets, we thought it appropriate to have one-page summaries on an annual basis that details those economic and social trends and how they're impacting our performance measures vis-a-vis our use of incentives. Again, this is nothing kind of profound, but I think this is really a good first step to say, here, let's define some parameters, and here's how we might organize ourselves. And again, completing this on an annual basis is the only way that we can really trend line it and understand if we're impacting the city and our residents in a positive way. The next slide is really just the start of, here's a potential framework, right? It's not robust and put it together because I think we need to have a further conversation on identifying and ranking the performance measures that we feel are important in conversations with potential partners and other experts. But really, we would have a model that looks something like this, right? Here's a list of projects, here's the ward, the area / the neighborhood, and then we sort of assign the value to these measures, and we understand their impacts on a go-forward basis, and we have an ability to trend line a lot of this information. So with that, because I know we have a rather hearty schedule, this is the last slide here that just kind of talks about next steps, and where I'm really looking, where we're really looking for insight and direction, but thought it made sense that we sort of initiate the creation of this 2016 report of incentives. So we have a running list, and I think, again, that information's probably available. We just have to work in concert with our friends at SLDC and others to make sure we can put together a comprehensive list. And then I think this body needs to think about ranking our performance measures. So keeping this information and the list that we provided, take a look at that and see which ones you think really are important in terms of tracking citizen quality of life and the improvement thereof, as well as any others that might come to mind. So that's sort of a little assignment for all of us. And then I think we can, once we have that, we can begin to sort of trend line these performances and even do maybe some beta testing on what we think it looks like, and then of course come back to the board as we make those adjustments, or we make that beginning. And then lastly, I think it's prudent and appropriate to invite some of those partners on the list, or others that I'm certain I might have missed, to come and talk to us about what are some important indicators in the community that affect everyday citizens, and how in the purview of this committee, how our use of incentives and our legislation on incentives can help, and how we improve that. So, I'm sort of asking permission, if it's okay, that we begin to reach out to some of these partnerships and have them come in the context of what we're talking about here, under the construct of incentives, in the purview of this committee, to come and let them rank, if you will, or let us know what they think we should look at, and we can take that under advisement.
Thank you, Alderman. Why don't you stay there for a second? Maybe I can spend 5 or 10 minutes here facilitating a little bit of discussion among committee members, and then we can go ahead and take up the bill. The goal is that as we go forward, we've done a fair amount of this in the past, that we devote the beginning of our meetings, or at least a portion of our meetings, to kind of education and kind of this long-term goal. And of course, we have all kinds of board bills that need to be dealt with on a ongoing basis, and we're going to have to we can't stop everything till we get all this stuff figured out, but this is a way for us to move forward. Just a couple quick comments. Everybody teases, behind my back, they tease me about trying to be professorial, and it is very nice to actually have a professor with us. I forget about the doctor's more formal title, but it is great to have someone with his skill set, knowledge, and experience helping us lead this discussion. Wanted to just make a couple quick observations, and then I'll try to open it up or direct this discussion a couple ways. I had the clerk set out before everybody a couple articles, and this discussion of tax base versus increasing the tax base versus increasing the tax rate is something that happens all over. It's happening everywhere all the time, and it's all around us. And one is an article that was in this last weekend's Post-Dispatch, and it is a really great example of the difference between tax base and tax rate. We have a relatively insulated or insular affluent community in the county, and they have a very high tax base. They have very few low-income people living in their municipality, and as a result of that, they can have a very low tax rate. And they had examples in the article about personal property. You know, this is the tax that you pay on your cars. Someone living in Ladue paying very low tax rate for their car, and people living in less affluent areas having a much higher rate and paying actually more taxes for cars that are worth less. Right. And so when we go ahead and ignore tax base, you know, trying to grow the tax base, we by default have to increase the tax rate, and that's an example there. Of course, these things can get out of hand, you know, or they can be very disruptive, and we need to have these conversations, be sensitive of it. I put another article out from the Wall Street Journal last week about the Atlanta election for mayor, and in that article they go through and they talk about the effects of gentrification and the rapid appreciation of real estate in Atlanta and how that is creating some problems for some families down there. And you know, we've had some very modest appreciation citywide in our city, but I think by comparison, you know, if we kind of benchmarked ourselves against Atlanta, we wouldn't have nearly that. You know, we're I think beginning to experience the very early stages of gentrification in some of the neighborhoods in St. Louis, but we have, by all evidence that I could see, we have a very serious problem with disinvestment in most neighborhoods. And we have a very significant gap between development cost and market value, which it results in free fall. So we're, you know, until you can go ahead and develop a piece of property and sell it for a profit, you're going to end up having disinvestment, and you're going to require needs for incentives. So I just wanted to go ahead and share these with you, and it's going to be, as we learn more about this is going to be an ongoing thing. One of the things that I wanted to just also mention, and I appreciate the aldermans from the 16th, if you go through here, what we're wanting to do, I believe what he's recommending for us to do, is on this model structure, on that page, everybody can kind of open that up. You know, if you think about what we've done so far with the model that Jonathan Ferry has done for us, basically what we've tried to do is take a look at new projects and make sure that there's a marginal increase in economic density or the economic revenue on a per square foot basis. And if a project is generating more revenue than a certain benchmark, then the project would qualify for incentives. That is going to be something that would lead us to greater density and you know, a program that would probably result in smart growth policies. And so right now, we have been very much focused on, okay, let's focus on incentives on that, and capping the incentives the thought is that as the density grows, smaller projects in very expensive areas wouldn't justify getting incentives. So it would be, that's the only dynamic that we're working at, and it's the only way that we're looking at capping incentives. But as we learn more, there's lots of other ways of beginning to cap these. And what this model structure will do, so what they're proposing is that we take a look at all the projects in 2016. Each project that I think the benchmark that we've been using historically is $30,000 a building permit per address or location. So we take a look at all of those projects, identify which neighborhood it's in, which ward, whether it's a non-for-profit or for-profit, because a not-for-profit's not going to pay real estate taxes, right? Then the value of the improvements, so the value, I don't know if it's the value of the project or the value of the permits, we'll probably figure that out when we get into that. Then the incentive value, we're calculating that now in every project before our committee. We used to not do that, or at least we used to not do it, I don't think, consistently. So now we're going to have the value of the incentive. We can start taking a look at other things, the amount of incentive per square foot, the type of the incentive used, was it TIF for tax abatement, values of other incentives. Did it have block grant money in it? Did it have new market tax credit, historic tax credits, and so forth? And then we can go ahead and start layering other things. What kind, was it residential? Was it commercial? Was it industrial? And as we start getting this data and we do that, we'll be able to start taking a look. And this is kind of what was called for when we did our study of incentives a couple years ago, but it's also going to be, at least parts of this, going to be required by the new general governmental accounting.
GASB.
Yeah, which are a new rule that's going to be going into effect, and I think it's this year actually. So what that's going to be able to do is we can begin thinking about capping incentives in all kinds of different directions. We can start thinking about capping them as a % of total development costs. So as a city, we don't want to have incentives more than 15 out of all the projects that are developed. We don't want to have incentives that, the total amount of incentives equaling more than 10% of the building permits. That's a whole nother way of looking at it. Or we don't want to have more than X number of incentives offered to residential property, or more than X number of incentives offered to office property, or more than X number of incentives offered to this part of city or versus that part of the city. And we can begin tracking that, and we can then go ahead and start creating caps on those incentives that mirror or reflect our kind of collective value system, or what the overall economic development plan for the city is. So if we say that it's important for our city to disincentivize, open storage, we wouldn't have any incentives going to that. And if we felt that it was important for us to incentivize dense employment like office, we might have more incentives going to that. So we can go ahead and begin thinking about dicing and slicing these incentives and capping them in different ways. But we need to get the information before us. But, that's just an idea. The other way that's, I think, important for us to consider, if we get back to the idea of how, what we should focus on, that tax base times tax rate, we're going to have that in sales tax, we're going to have that in earnings tax, and we're going to have that in real estate taxes and everything else. And when we start looking at that, it's tax rate times tax base, is our hotel industry profitable for us? And we should be able to dial down and look at that specific industry. There's ways of doing that, and we can start thinking about which industries we want to go ahead and target with incentives, and or which. So there's a lot of things that can grow out of this, and that's why we talk about this thing peeling an onion. So I just wanted to kind of add that. Now I think what our facilitator was wanting us to do today was have a bit of discussion about creating this model structure, so that we can go ahead and make a formal request that is compiled for us for 2016, and then we're going to need somebody to go out and get that information, and most of that should be available. It's just going to take some time for somebody to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is perhaps we can go ahead and start talking about what things are most important for us, which is, which do we want to drill down into, which of the revenue sources, and then, I perhaps have some discussion about inviting someone here. Is that your intent,
Yeah,
Alderman?
I think so. I mean, I think it's important
Why
to
don't I,
take a look
since
at
you've
those
done so much
partners.
work on this, which of those topics you want to talk about first, or do you want to just want the committee to go through and ask questions and make comments?
Yeah, I think so, and maybe gleaning from any comments or questions the committee might have, thinking about ranking those performance measures, which one we feel are the most important. And then I would love sort of the takeaway to go and begin working with sort of internal partners here, probably SLDC is the first place to start, so how we get a comprehensive list of 2016 incentives, and then I think I would love to, with everyone's permission, to think about who we might want to invite for the next committee. If we're going to try to, at the top of these meetings, have 20 or 25 minutes to continue this process, it might make sense to maybe invite one of those partners to come in and talk to us and let them know about what we're doing in either how they can help or how they can help us with the indicators.
Okay, why don't we kind of go through the committee, get some comments, and then I don't know what this is all new to me, so we're kind of bumbling as we go along here. Alderman Kennedy, do you have any questions or comments on the work?
Just stepped out.
Oh, he stepped out. Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions or comments on the work that the alderman from the 16th has done?
I do. Thank you so much, Alderman. Appreciate it. I've had a chance to work with Professor Gerard, and he's done an outstanding job for the city so far. My question is, do you understand Jonathan's methodology on incentives? Did you guys work with that at all, or are you just starting fresh?
I've worked with Jonathan, I understand them.
Is that somehow incorporated into the formula you guys coming up with, or the methodology you'll be using, or are you just going to go with something different?
Well, it'll be, oh, sorry.
It will be incorporated, because what the model looks at, it basically looks at what a property should produce in property taxes if the city was fully funded. And then what we're trying to do is really look at the economic picture of a neighborhood and see how it's performing and see how those projects are really impacting really the financial viability of those neighborhoods. And so they're basically related.
I would also add the value that he assigns to the incentive that you see will be helpful. That will probably be how we use what we use in tracking the value of the incentive.
So are you guys going to kind of complement each other, or we're going to have one standard, or where are we going with this exactly?
I think this is more of a big picture of citywide and drilling down to each neighborhood the incentives we use. I think Jonathan's model really kicks out, here's the value of the incentive, right? Net present valued, and make a decision based on that set of facts and project specific, which I think is fine, because projects, the facts and circumstances are always different on a per project level. I think what we're hoping to do is the value that he's assigning in his model on a per project basis to really broaden that and look at it from a citywide perspective. And then we can sort of get into the things that the chairman suggested around industries, because we'll have more of a macro look at everything. So his model is more of a granular project specific, and our hope is to maybe widen that lens to look at it from a much broader view.
And one more thing. Then also too, once we have data, in the neighborhood over a 10-year period, like for example, the model looks at, if we do an office development, it looks at cannibalization, how much of, whether it be retail sales or housing, is basically pulling from other neighborhoods, or is it coming from outside the neighborhood? If we have data on the health of that neighborhood over a decade, and we'll have a better sense of cannibalization. Like if we incentivize an office project downtown, right, and the office market hasn't improved, like the vacancy rate has actually went up, then, we can have a sense of, well, maybe that project that we incentivize basically potentially took tenants within the city versus growing the entire market, which is what we want to do, right? We want to grow these areas, not just move pieces around and incentivize that.
So you're going to go back historically for 10 years and
Yes.
do some evaluation?
That would be the hope.
Okay. And the nonprofit build-out that has occurred over the past 15 years. Is that factored into the formula anywhere? Because a lot of times that's a boost to a neighborhood, but it's also potentially a blow to the tax base.
Yeah, good.
It will be. There are actually other projects I'm working on that are going to look at nonprofits. And one of the things I would want to express to the board is that, all these projects are interconnected, right? As we get access to the Federal Reserve or what have you, that is going to give the ability to look at basically all types of developers, right? Nonprofits, for-profits, government entities, right? When a public university expands, that's actually the government entity expanding. And so, really one of the most important two things, if I can get across to the board, is one, we must track data at the neighborhood level, right? That is by far the most important thing. And that two, we need to build a formal process with a private entity to help us get consistent, accurate, defendable information. Similar to what other cities do. That is one, that it's an entity that's going to exist 20 years from now, has a repeatable process, and has the staff to help us pull that data together. But yes, we will look at nonprofits, because if you really look at some of the bigger developments in this city, they're nonprofits. Whether it be BJC, whether it be Washington University, whether it be SLU. And as we know, they add a lot of value to the city, but from just bottom line dollars in the door, we would rather have a for-profit entity in a lot of situations doing that development than a nonprofit.
And drilling down to each neighborhood is certainly exciting. Let me ask you this. From a planning perspective, forecasting down the road, once you get all the data, will we be able to look and say, this is the greatest neighborhood in need, therefore we should work toward a strategy to incentivize that particular neighborhood as a priority?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the goal. We can see where our incentives are being used, and those performance indicators will probably lead us to say, well, here's where we probably need to concentrate efforts, at least when we're maximizing our use of incentives.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Appreciate it.
Alderwoman Davis, any questions?
Very quickly. In looking at this, first of all, let me thank you all for your work. This is not going to be an easy task. And for all those who are so anxious, they need to understand that this is not a hurry up and get it done. It's going to take at least a year, probably more like 18 months. So as we're looking at who we're going to talk to, I just kind of made a list of other items that are going to fall out in these conversations. So that's public safety, clean city, health. All those things determine quality of life. And from experiencing a study, when we did the health disparity study, it took us a little over 18 months. And we had all the partners, everyone who touched health in any kind of way. And first, we need to hear what they have to say. Then secondly, they help us determine need, focus, and future. And I'm really excited to see that you have your outline going towards those directions. So I guess what I want to ask you is, do you plan to bring those other entities in? Because you really need that. I saw everything but those that I mentioned.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, that's probably, we talked about that, but probably overlooked in terms of access to health care, public safety, crime. Those are absolutely performance indicators that we need to look at if we're talking about quality of life in our neighborhoods. So we need to probably think about where the right partnerships exist for that data, and have a consensus here that we agree that I'm thinking, are there health centers, right? Federally qualified health centers that exist, where do they exist in the city? Track that, and then in terms of patient care that they see. So that's information that I know we kind of have and would be able to get, and it would be exciting and should be incorporated in this, yeah. So those partners are also the folks that I think we should welcome down here, and when we say we need some indicators, what do you all look at, here's what we want to look at. Because I think it could be worthwhile, and this is editorial, the data will lead us ultimately to the conclusions, but we should try to be encouraging healthcare and access to healthcare in probably the most disinvested parts of our city. Because that's sort of, in my mind, right, that's quality of life measure number one.
I guess my last question is, as we're moving through this process, I know this is a lot to ask, but can we also have an aside that is educating the public?
Yeah.
The average person does not understand the incentive process, and most people believe that we're giving somebody some money, and we're not. We also know that we are all very concerned about our school district, and no one could be more of a champion than I am, but I do understand that those projects that were incentivized brought more money to the school district, because you got to look at the futures.
Right.
And that's what most people don't understand. So if I had a building or a vacant lot that wasn't bringing me any tax revenue in 10 years or whatever it is, now I'm bringing X amount of dollars, that's an addition to the school district. You haven't taken anything away. And so if we could have some educational opportunities as well.
I think that's important.
Okay.
I'll just comment that I've already had a very extensive meeting with the CFO of the St. Louis Public Schools, and we've begun the process of talking about, one, getting information from them. You know, one of the things that I asked of them is that we understand the current funding levels of the St. Louis Public Schools and how they compare to the county districts. But the important thing is we don't know what their targets are, right? We've not been given what their true funding targets are and what their true needs are, particularly as it relates to special needs kids, and also the impact of charter schools on their financial model. So we had a very healthy discussion about that, as well as incentives and the impact, you know, positive and negative on them. And so I have my to-do list for Ms. Banks on the things that I need to get to her and she needs to get to me, but that I just want you to know that process has started.
Wonderful. That's very good. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Alderman Kodar, do you have any questions?
Questions at this time, Mr. Chairman?
Alderman Ogilvy.
I guess just quickly, I mean, in my mind, the key performance measures are population growth or stability and job growth or retention, with the goal of growing the tax base, right?
Yep.
I'd put quality of life alongside that, you know, the next. But then I'd also, and I don't really see it here, is there's probably certain market segments that deliver more tax revenue than others.
Yeah.
And thinking about, you know, incentivizing things that deliver more tax revenue is important. And also spatially putting things in the right place. So I didn't necessarily see that on here. And I mean, I think if we get there, it'll be very interesting and informative to have routine reporting from, I think, the various entities that you guys mentioned. That dashboard has never really existed for us, so hopefully we can
That would be
create
the hope, right?
Yeah.
On an annual basis, we can, year over year.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
Alderman Bosley, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say you all did a great job. Very good presentation. I'm learning, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not really sure how it's best to proceed. What I think is that we can go ahead and cover a whole bunch of different measures at a very high level, or we can go ahead and take a couple measures and try to go deep with them
Right.
and, really start drilling down to see how hard it is. And I thought that, if we get one thing accomplished, I'd like to get a couple more than one, but the first thing I think we absolutely need accomplished is a report on what happened in 2016.
Yep.
Is there any discussion about that as being a high priority for us as a committee?
I'm okay with getting the report for 2016, but I'm not that thrilled about moving forward on anything else until the structure is in place. You really can't deal with analysis and things unless you have the appropriate entities at the table and the structure of how you're going to proceed in place. And that's going to take a minute to put that together.
Correct.
So while you're getting the data for 2016, there probably needs to be a parallel for structure.
Sure. So then, if I'm hearing, I think it makes sense then, let's go ahead and get the report for 2016, but in concert with that, stay in communication with you all on maybe partners or outside sources that we'd like to come in and talk to us about potential performance
I think
measures.
the report is going to bring up some new things, too.
Yeah, and I think the report, good point, the report's going to bring up some discussion as
Yeah.
well,
So.
and how we organize that,
Yeah,
Chairman. will
right.
probably be-
I guess here's my problem is, we're waiting for this economic development plan, that is going to be $1 million or $2 million or whatever it is. And I don't want us not to be doing anything. I think a lot of people are looking for our committee to do something in this area. So I want us to keep moving, and, at some point, hopefully, somebody will find some money and do that. But meanwhile, we're sitting here, and we're going to be continuing doing our work. I think as we go ahead and start finding information, the structure is going to vary depending upon what the information is. In other words, if we're doing stuff with the school board, we're going to be working with them to get information from the school board about, and we've already had them in, but we need to kind of clean up that information and get it, better. But if we're going to get information on healthcare, it might be, a whole nother entity that we interact with. Or if it's on affordable housing, it might be CDA. So I think that we need to, focus on one of these things, figure out how to do it. And it's been my argument that we're not spending enough. We're spending very few resources. We collect information in a bunch of different departments throughout the city. We have the assessor's office, we have the collector's office, we have the comptroller's office, we have the budget division, and we're collecting this, we're producing a whole lot of report, but nobody is kind of taking that volumes of information and reorganizing it in a way that it will help us to make better decisions. And nobody that I've been able to find since I've been down here has been thinking about how do we go ahead and do that to actually grow tax base and, bring it, as the Alderman from the 24th said, into a dashboard. So I think what we want to do is try to find one or two of these things. And
But they're all intertwined.
I agree that they're intertwined, but I think we're going to have to struggle. It's going to be a learning experience going out and trying to find this information. But ideally, we would find some resources to eventually make this thing sustainable, because right now we're requiring on, the volunteer time of the alderman from the 16th to head this up. He's tapping a bunch of the different city departments to bring it in. I think our
We bring the structure together and the partners together, we can relieve ourselves of a lot of work that they can do for us and information that they already have.
I agree, but it's still, believe me, it's an effort to get out that even getting these people, and all of them have other jobs, they're sitting there, and part of the reason I wanted to bring this before the committee is that when the alderman from the 16th calls, or when our financial analyst calls one of these departments, I think it's important that they have the empanada, or what's the term that I want to use, that it's the blessing of our
Yes.
committee,
Yes.
and we expect the different department heads to respond, in a timely manner so that we can get this information and that it's not something that's meant, for next year to get around to. It's something that we want now. So, is there any other discussion? I'm going to suggest that you guys focus on one or two of these things, try to figure out, how to do that. In the interim, I don't think we should stop. I think we'll bring in, our hope is we're running out of time this year, but early next year, the alderman from the 16th and I have talked about, bringing in some other groups to come in and kind of help them share their perspective on what's important for us to be doing. And then we can go ahead and start building these things. And we're not standing still. This is going to be a slow, very slow process, but we got to start somewhere. Any other discussions on this? We've taken up.
Yeah, I mean, if it's all right, what I might do, Mr. Chairman, is just to, like you said, to at least maybe play with this, is to pick one of the performance measures from the economic viability bucket, our property tax. That's something we can get pretty readily. And then grab a few of these performance measures from quality of life page, and maybe just try to start massaging some of that to see how it might play.
We kind of did a little bit of work on that on the, school board that obviously needs to be refined, and I think we're very close to having at least one of the affordable housing measures, set up, so.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, Alderman, for your work on this.
Good job.
Yeah, more to go, but thanks, guys.
Thank you. I have to apologize that we had a couple board bills that got posted that were not, they were advertised, not for this meeting, but they're for, I think, a later date. Madam Clerk, 189, 191, and 192, is that correct? So those bills are not to be heard today. One of those is Alderman Moore's. Those were,
They're going to be heard in January.
those are scheduled to be, they are being advertised to be heard in January. Okay. Why don't we then go ahead and, I think most of these things are are sponsored by committee members, with the exception of the Alderwoman from the 6th is with us, and she is not on the committee, so why don't we go ahead and take up hers first. Alderwoman, Board Bill number 25, please.
Nobody to speak for 25.
Okay. Here. Alderwoman Davis, you want to go ahead, maybe when you, I don't know when she's going to come back in, did you want to go ahead and, Resolution 166, would that be very controversial? Can we take that up real quick?
Let me see. I don't even
In-
remember. Thomas Crow.
Enterprise on,
Yeah, that could be pretty fast. Oh, there she is.
oh, here she is, okay.
I apologize, Chairman, I have a bit of a cough, so I grabbed some water. Which board bill are we on?
We're beginning with Board Bill number 25.
Okay. Do we have copies of that somewhere? Thank you. Board Bill 25 is a rezoning of a residential area that, for some reason, we uncovered was zoned industrial. It's densely residential. We have a scattered site project here of high-quality, low-income housing units, and in order for the financing to fall into place, the zoning cannot remain industrial. The property owner is here and can answer some questions if you have specifics regarding financing, but the neighborhood, the block, and the neighbors are all supportive of this because we were all kind of surprised to find out that homes were zoned industrial in this area. Happy to take questions.
Does everybody have that in front of them? I don't seem to have Board Bill number.
I don't have any of it. I already looked.
You
It's on the
have
top.
Board Bill,
You might have moved it off the top.
Was the first one.
It was the first two.
oh, here it is. My apologies. Okay, any questions of the Alderwoman from the 6th regarding Board Bill number 25? Alderman Kennedy is not present. Alderman Boyd?
Yes, is it currently a house there? Or is this a vacant lot?
Yes, no, there is, at one of the addresses, there's a mixed-use space, so commercial on the first floor and then residential on the second.
I'm just curious, what brought this about?
There's a redevelopment project through RISE and Lutheran Development Corporation, and when they were putting their financing in order, it was determined by the folks who were financing that they would only provide the financing if the property was owned without the
So this is a rehab?
industrial. It's a rehab project,
Gotcha.
absolutely.
Okay, no further questions.
Alderwoman Davis?
No questions.
Alderman Kotar?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy?
No questions.
Alderwoman Boyd?
No question.
Alderman Bosley?
No questions.
Alderman Oldenburg?
Nope.
Seeing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 25 with a due pass recommendation. Been moved.
Second.
It's been seconded by the Alderman from the 7th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderman Kotar.
Aye.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
8 aye votes, do pass.
Okay, next up is by the Alderman from the 6th, Alderwoman from the 6th Ward, Board Bill number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is just an extension of Board Bill 25 with changing the zoning from industrial to multifamily dwelling district. 2801 and 2803 have a commercial space on the first floor. These units are just residential, and so and again, with the financing and then one piece of property where the property owner just preferred to have his home be zoned residential instead of industrial. And happy to take questions.
Any questions for the Alderwoman from the 6th? Alderman Boyd?
Actually, the question is for the zoning administrator, Mary Hart. Burton. Out of curiosity, why couldn't we put this in one bill? This one, and the one we
because
just
it
passed,
was-
and this one?
Because it was two different property owners, so one was done under one petition and one was done under another petition, so that's why we had two separate board bills.
The zoning change is different.
Right, so let me ask you this. If it wasn't a petition from the homeowners themselves, could it be one bill?
Well, the only people that can petition to do a rezoning are the property owners or the planning commission, and generally the planning commission only petitions a rezoning whenever it's a large development project, not small sites like this.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Alderwoman Davis?
No questions.
Alderman Kotar?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy?
No questions.
Alderwoman Boyd?
No questions.
Alderman Bosley?
No questions.
Alderman Oldenburg?
No.
Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain the motion for a due pass recommendation for Board Bill number 26.
Previous.
We need a second. Okay, I'm sorry. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 24th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 27th, and there was a request for the previous roll by the Alderwoman from the 19th. Hearing no objections, we will consider Board Bill number 26 heard and passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill number 105.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is in a different area of the city, however, a similar issue. We have a developer who's taking over a large former warehouse space to turn it into residential with some commercial development on the first floor. It's currently zoned industrial, and he's requesting that it be changed to H, his area commercial district. Happy to take questions, and the developers here as well.
Let's see, do we have any?
No one
No one signed up for any of those. Okay.
I don't know what you say.
Do you want me to start over? Sure thing. So this is a similar request. The developer for this particular property on Locust is requesting that we move from the industrial warehouse that the current property sits on to area commercial district. He has a project, a rehabilitation project, which will include residential apartments and then commercial space on the first floor.
Okay, any questions of the Alderwoman from the 6th? Alderman Boyd?
No questions.
Alderman Davis?
Can you explain the project just a little bit?
Sure. Would you like me to have the developer come up?
Be interesting. It's
Okay.
exciting. I always put excitement out there.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Powell.
Want to tell us a little bit about your project in detail?
Yes, the 5-story at 2647, I'm developing the upper 4 floors into residential, with some larger apartments, eventually turn them into condos. And then the next door is 2653. It's a 2-story warehouse. The first level is going to remain commercial, and the upper level is going to be smaller spaces, live, work, spaces, apartments.
Okay, very good.
We share that area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're always excited. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Kotar, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy? No questions. Alderman Boyd? Alderwoman Boyd?
No questions.
Alderman Bosley?
No questions.
Alderman Oldenburg?
No questions.
Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out of committee Board Bill number 105.
So moved.
Second.
Previous roll.
Been moved and seconded. Request for previous roll. Hearing no objections to the previous roll, we will consider Board Bill number 105 as heard and passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation. Alderman, we're up to your resolution, which we held over from previously. It's resolution number 15. At the time, we held that at my request to provide you an opportunity to contemplate the role of our efforts in incentive reform. Since then, we've passed a resolution, while not perfect, is an interim step in that. Our committee has worked very diligently. We have a great deal of work to go, and we are at a point where we are very interested in trying to instill confidence of the public in our use of incentives. And I don't think there's a member of the board who does not believe that we could do a better job in these things. And it's very important to me as chair that we have members of our board that are not undermining our efforts down here, but are publicly, to the best within their good conscience, acknowledging our efforts in that area. And so at this point, we'd like to go ahead and provide you an opportunity to address resolution number 15 again. And hopefully we can expect your support in the future as we move forward with projects around the city. But please go ahead and say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am definitely in favor of the resolution that we passed with respect to the HUD's committee work, and I appreciate all the effort that has gone into that. As a reminder, for those of you, since it's been a while, Resolution 15 is 21st Street Properties LLC, which is Hamilton Hospitality Project. One of the things I find outside of the fact that it's already in an enhanced enterprise zone and 10 years of abatement simply needs a resolution here at the board is that Paul and Wendy Hamilton are exceedingly good stewards of city dollars. They provide over 200 jobs to St. Louis City residents. 75% of their employees do live in the city, and 75% of them are women and people of color. Before we were preempted at the state level, they already paid all of their employees over the minimum wage that the St. Louis City Board instituted. And so I'm really excited that they're expanding again. There are some more projects down the pipeline, and so in order for them to be able to have their financing in place, this is something that I would request your favorable consideration on. I'm happy to ask questions, and I have David Richardson, who represents the property as well, if you have questions for him.
Okay, We haven't had you signed up on this. This is resolution, yeah, no, I guess not. Alderman Boyd, any questions?
Not at this time.
Alderwoman Davis, any questions?
What is the project?
It's a brewery, the Charville Brewing Company and Tavern. It's in a building that sits just to the side of Moulin and Vin de Sette.
That's all, thank you.
Alderman Kotar.
No question.
Alderman Ogilvy.
No question.
Alderwoman Boyd.
That was the question I was going to ask.
Alderman Bosley.
No question.
Alderman Oldenburg.
How long have they been operating there? Do you know when they opened?
They've been open for a number of months, but they did fulfill the requirements with respect to when the resolution was filed. It's a little bit of a different situation than an abatement that would go for like a residential project, where we would prefer that the project
I
not
see.
be complete
Yep, okay.
upon awarding abatement.
It wasn't procedural. My question was more just out of curiosity, how long they've been kind of in that space, because it's a pretty cool space.
It is a great space.
No further questions.
Alderwoman, I just want to, I don't want to make too big of a deal out of this, but this is very important to me that we go ahead and start trying to instill confidence in the public of our use of incentives. I'm supporting this because many of the projects that I supported out of my ward and other wards typically take years in incubation period. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and as we begin, if we change the rules before we pass, the legislation down here, we jeopardize alienating and destroying, very important investors to us. And this is obviously a very important investor in your ward. They own other restaurants. They have made an investment here. They've made, it's my understanding, they're intending to make future investments. And I'm supporting this because I don't believe that we should change the rules on them. I think it would be disastrous for them. For us, it sends a terrible signal for the city for us to go ahead and, after they've gone through all this work, for us not to live up to that. That is the same situation that exists in other wards with other projects that were queued up before we started looking into these things and began making changes and doing the analysis that we have Jonathan doing. This is a changing landscape, and I'm supporting this today, but if I see future public statements undermining what we're trying to do in our committee, all bets are off in the future with regard to my support for projects in the 6th Ward. So I just want to be very clear with that. With that, we have no other questions or comments on Resolution 15. I would like to go ahead and entertain a motion that we pass out Resolution 15 with a do pass recommendation today.
So move.
Second.
Previous roll.
All right. So thank you,
Thank you.
Alderwoman, for your time today. Let's go ahead and jump through these. All the rest of the legislation before us today is by members of the committee. Why don't we go ahead and, Alderwoman Davis, do you want to go ahead and take up your enterprise zone?
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Resolution number 166 references a project at 1641 Tower Grove. The building was formerly the Hoffman Brothers HVAC company, been there for a number of years on that corner, Tower Grove, and I think it's McCree. What we're looking at is the opportunity where we will now have another retail establishment on that corner. The building has been purchased. The owners have determined that they will do significant investment to the property. I've passed out to you a rendering of the building itself and the expectations for how it's going to look in the future. You also have the estimated fiscal impact for tax abatement, which I'm asking for 5 years tax abatement for that. So that property sits in Botanical Heights. It was assessed value of the property is $108,000. The company has purchased that property for $815,000 and will invest over $578,000 into the renovation, and the company plans to employ at least 40 people at that location. We have had extensive conversations. I have confidence in their approach. They do understand the mandates of us as far as having minority participation, looking to hire city residents as a priority. And one of the things that I like about it is that we will now have another retail establishment for a growing community in the areas that sits there between Shaw, Botanical Heights, and very close to the Tiffany neighborhoods as well. I'll accept any questions, please.
Alderman, I share a boundary of that with
Yes, sir.
you, and I think it's just really exciting what's happening along Tower Grove there, and, we're recreating a pedestrian corridor. It's hard to imagine all that happening. Congratulations on this project.
Thank you.
Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions, Alderman? Alderman declines questions. Alderman Kotar, any questions? Oh, he stepped out. Alderman Ogilvy, any questions?
On these enhanced enterprise zone abatements, are we going to start doing the full analysis?
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like the full? Sure.
Well, I mean, it's not, it's more of a, I think I mean just in the future. I mean, it's not here.
I
This is
think
a
that's something we
5-year
could put on our
tax
list,
abatement,
for
but-
sure.
Was there, I'm sorry, I was talking, was the analysis not attached to the bill, or
The project's under $1 million, so John doesn't.
Okay.
Right.
Is that, so it's not that it's an EEZ, it's that it's under $1 million, and that's why, okay.
Yeah,
If it's over $1 million and it's an EEZ, we would have the full financial now.
Right.
Got it. Okay, that's fine.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Boyd, any questions?
Can I ask, what is, I see the pictures and stuff.
Sure, I want to ask them to come up and explain the project in detail,
Thanks.
because I like to put excitement out there.
Yeah, give us some excitement.
Thank you, Alderman. Appreciate it. Hi, good morning. I'm Doug Rasmussen. I'm with a company called Duff & Phelps. We're an economic development firm here in St. Louis, and the project, as the Alderwoman mentioned, is the purchase of the former Hoffman Brothers building. That company vacated the building early this year, and they moved their operations out to Brentwood. And so the prospective new project here is actually owned by Ben Paremba and his business partner. And so Ben runs Olio Restaurant, the Choquette Bakery, Nixta, and Alea, so he's got a couple other restaurants and things in that area. His plan would be, as the Alderwoman said, would be to invest about $1.5 million, including the acquisition. And the idea is to have take what is currently now a vacant building, open up all the windows, create more of a urban setting in terms of it's hard to tell from that picture, but basically what happens is all those windows, right now if you look at that building now, all the windows are basically bricked up. There's really not a pedestrian kind of feel around that building. So kind of, look at the streetscape, street trees, open up the windows, make it more urban, put more of an outdoor, kind of walkability to the whole project. And in terms of the actual end users in the building, so there is an LOI with a restaurant that'll be moving from Maplewood into the city. They do have a salon as well that's moving in as well, that's expanding. And then other ones that they're talking to is a startup tech company, a bike shop from out of town, bike shop, coffee shop, And then actually, Ben was actually here, but he had to leave, and so he asked me to also say thanks for the opportunity today, but he mentioned as well, he's looking at a kind of a small general store, coffee shop concept as well for part of that building. And so the idea is you're going to have all these sort of small, office/retail services, put more people on the street, make that building more attractive from a kind of an urban point of view, and then have, kind of start on the other side of the street, if you will, from where some of Ben's other restaurants and things are. And as the Alderwoman said, about 40 jobs. We think there'll be about, 800,000 or so in payroll, about another 300,000 additional personal property. So it'd be a significant project in that area.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
So, and Alderwoman Davis know where I'm coming from. So you're not tearing it down, you're just rehabbing the building that's there?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, any other questions, Alderwoman?
No.
Okay, Alderman Bosley, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Alderman Oldenburg, any questions?
No questions, I'm sorry.
Hearing no other questions, we actually did have a speaker, but that was Mr. Rasmussen, so we're good there. The chair will entertain a motion that we pass out resolution number 166 with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman
Second.
from 27, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. Is there a request for, the Alderwoman from the 27th request previous roll? Objection. Oh, there's an objection to the previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy? Alderman Boyd?
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis? Alderman Kotar? Alderman Ogilvy?
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd?
Aye.
Alderman Bosley?
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg?
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
8 aye votes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Alderwoman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see, now we are, Alderman from the 22nd, why don't we take up your resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Resolution 167 provides, it's a real simple resolution. It provides 99 years of tax abatement for 5642 Natural Bridge. You got that?
How
It was a
many
joke.
years?
It was a joke. I just want to see if you guys were paying attention. I only wanted to see if you were paying attention. It's 10 years of simple tax abatement for property located at 5642 Natural Bridge. This was formerly Sports Play, who makes a lot of playground equipment. You actually can't enter this location from Natural Bridge. You have to kind of go down Clara and go around the back. But I'm really excited. Sports Play unfortunately moved out of the city into the county, but we were fortunate enough to have Warehouse of Fixtures looking to expand, who would take over that space and put about $300,000 worth of enhancement and upgrades. And so we're excited to have them as a new business partner in the 22nd Ward. And Mr. Doug Rossman also was part of that deal. He's doing phenomenal work for the city to kind of help bring development. By the way, Doug used to be with the St. Louis Partnership, right, Doug? Okay, so he's very familiar with St. Louis and St. Louis resident, loves his city, and I'm really excited to be working with him and the Warehouse of Fixture owners.
Warehouse of Fixtures at one point was in the 17th Ward, so.
You ran them out?
At one point in the 19th Ward.
So they're
So-
coming.
You're lost in my game.
And
Well-
it continue to grow. I
Right.
love it.
That's exciting.
Let's see, is there any questions of the Alderman from the 22nd? Alderman Kennedy.
Thanks. So they're moving the entire operation to your, that location?
Doug?
Yeah, this is a big warehouse here. A blessing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Boyd. Actually, this is a second location for Warehouse of Fixtures, so they will remain, over by Wells Fargo where they are. And so this operation for them will be, and actually there's a related business that the owner, Warehouse of Fixtures, is also bringing into this facility. So there's actually two businesses. One is a manufacturer called Refurbisher that makes, basically remanufactures furniture, and so they'll have 40 jobs at the facility. And then Warehouse of Fixtures, who's the furniture wholesaler, retailer, supplier, they'll be creating 6 new positions at this facility, and those will be mostly delivery positions, but they'll have some sales and management there too. So it'll be a second location. It doesn't impact their location on Market Street.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Boyd, any questions? Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Davis.
I'm excited for you. This is good. But I just have to compliment the owners. They have been great, great partners with the city of St. Louis over the years. They get it, and they're committed, and we appreciate it.
Pass it on to them.
Alderman Kotar expresses his his apologies, but he has to run over to a meeting at SLDC regarding a project in his ward. Alderman Ogilvy, any questions?
I think Alderman Kennedy asked my question. That's fine.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Ditto from Alderwoman Davis.
Alderman Bosley.
No questions, but look forward to seeing a project come to fruition.
Alderman Oldenburg.
No questions.
Okay, Sanger brothers, is it Sanger family, are they still the?
Correct. David
Yeah.
Singer?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great, congratulations. Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out.
Second.
Man, we're getting this.
Previous row?
Who was the second? I didn't said it at the same time.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a request for the previous roll. There's no objection, so we'll consider resolution number 167 is heard and passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, that gets us to some of my stuff, and some of this I am not terribly familiar with. Let's see if we can't, I'm going to try to.
You got a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I gotta get with y'all to help me start.
Let's start with, Michael, you're here for what? Is that 138? Yeah, okay. I'm going to ask, I'm not terribly familiar with this. I understand that it's there's no economic impact on the city on this, right? This is just adjusting some.
Yeah, this is a variety of technical adjustments.
I'm sorry, could you?
My name is Dan Burke with Armstrong Teasdale, here on behalf of Cortex, and Mike Sullivan with Cortex is also here if you have other questions, but this is a very technical fifth supplemental note indenture. We're getting ready to, tomorrow, I think, or Friday, later this week, issue additional bonds based on the development that's gone on in the Cortex district. In anticipation of that and related to that, we're cleaning up some things. So these are, there was an RPA 7B note that was issued for 5.1. We're dividing that into a B note and a C note so that we can use it if need be for out parcel development near IKEA. That also shuffles the revenues around a little bit within RPA 7, so those sort of technical things, but the note is already issued, it's already endorsed, 7's already activated, all those good things, and there's no project right now proposed. Also, the state supplemental TIF that we were able to get approved is being pledged to the bond estate. Related to that, we need to update a date related to the super TIF and basically just adjust some of the indenture provisions to make it consistent with the bond deal. So.
Tom Ray, did you represent the comptroller's department on this, or?
I did not because I'm with the same firm with Dan, so.
Okay, you could not. But who from the city has reviewed this? Do we have someone from the city who?
Rob Droney reviewed it on behalf of the comptroller's office and approved it, but he is not here.
Okay. Can we get somebody from the comptroller's office down here, or to just say that they've reviewed this and there's no economic impact on the city?
We'll start asking them to send something and attach it.
Okay, while we do this, this is like mind-numbingly complex, but we will go ahead and provide this. I believe it's mostly a paper shuffle is
Yeah,
what
Mike,
it's, what
Mike Sullivan with Cortex. These are a number of administrative cleanup items. The master TIF was passed in 2013, so every time the group of lawyers looks at this, then we have a chance to fine-tune the updated information. These are simple administrative items. There's a fiscal note that's a part of the requirement when we submitted the bill. Every one of the boxes is checked no. There's no financial impact. There's, well, you should have it in your packages. So the bottom line is this is a cleanup item that we needed to put forth. And if you have any questions, be happy to ask them. But it's just a number of things that we just need to make sure that when we issue bonds that everything is in good shape.
Okay. While we wait to hear from the comptroller's office on this, the alderwoman from the 19th said that list any source on page 4 of the financial fiscal notes addendum, near the middle of the page, it says list any sources of information, including any city official agencies or departments used in preparing this fiscal note, and they acknowledge SLDC and the Office of the Comptroller. So, but I'd like to kind of have somebody down here from them affirming that. In the interim, why don't we go through and I don't want to deny the committee any opportunity to ask questions, but we could, I fear could be here several hours, you know, reviewing this, but why don't we go ahead and go through now and at least provide people an opportunity to focus in on something. Alderman Kennedy has stepped out. Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions or?
For the sake of people that are new on the committee and a refresher course for myself, please explain Super TIF, Master TIF, so that we have the right context of what we're doing with this. Yeah. So the Master TIF was what the Board of Aldermen passed in 2013 that gave us the ability to redevelop the whole 200 acres that Cortex has redevelopment rights. It was granted by the city going back to 2004. The state TIF is totally separate from the city, and we were able to go to the state, and they saw some of the great things we were doing, and so they allowed us to capture some of the sales tax that the state was collecting on the IKEA project, and we were able to repurpose those funds for various projects, including the Cortex station that Metrolink has partnered with us, and we have a $10.3 million Tiger grant from the federal government. We needed a local match. That was a project. We were able to bring a building with subsidies involved, lower rent for a community maker space, and other Cortex district-wide opportunities. And so that doesn't come out of the city's monies at all. That's the state looking to what we're doing and wanting to partner with the city and Cortex to continue the momentum that we have here. So on this 200 acres, there's a TIF overlaid on top of everything, and there's still room for growth, right?
Yes, sir.
So there, let's say a couple of parcels, someone wants to bring in some retail or what have you. How does that work? You come back to the board and do another administrative?
So they're broken into 11 redevelopment project areas. We've already gone through the city process for the first 5. Mm-hmm. Each time we develop a project in a redevelopment project area that has not been activated, we then come back and go through the process. So yes, you are correct. And the advantage of doing the master TIF is that there's a 23-year time limit. Mm-hmm. So if we had just had one universal TIF for the 200 acres, the clock would have started running day one.
You see with the Grand Center, they did just one TIF, and so they're now getting pretty far into they don't have as much time left, so it's harder to continue to do great new projects. So we partnered with the city, and they approved the 11 RPAs and the overall master TIF.
Okay, so we approved 11, and until you activate one, it just kind of sits there.
Correct. Yeah, we have 10 years under the TIF statute to activate all of the RPAs or not, and we'll be back before you early next year. We've started the TIF commission process and to activate RPA 3 for a specific project that WashU affiliate is looking at. So we'll be back soon to activate another one, and that was the initial plan was, over time, over the first 5-8 years, we would be knocking off these RPAs as projects get lined up.
Okay, well, you answered my next question, so thank you. No further questions.
Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman Kotar has stepped out. Alderman Ogilvy.
Thanks. So this portion of the TIF is being activated because there's a project that needs it, I assume.
Oh, and sorry to clarify, that's next year. This is just adjustments to the TIF note indenture that's already existing, TIF notes that are already issued, areas that are already activated. This is just technical stuff that's before you today.
So it's not related to a project?
I mean, in a sense, it's related to the IKEA project that's already done, but it's all completed projects, and this just adjusts TIF revenues so that we could use it for another project in RPA 7 near IKEA if something comes before us.
Okay.
But we have to do it related to the bond issuance, because if we gave a $5.1 million note to the bond estate and then found a project and needed to use part of it, all the bondholders would have to approve it, and it would be a nightmare. And so we do this now in connection with the bond issuance.
With a new bond issuance or with?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Just so we're, gosh, this is, I sit down and I will go through this with Mike for an hour or two, and I'll understand it for 5 minutes, and then I walk out of the room and forget everything. And that's a little bit why I'm a little afraid to open up this can of worms. If it doesn't, if it doesn't impact money, I kind of feel like it's a little different thing, so I don't want to deny anybody the opportunity to probe as much as they feel they need to get comfortable with this, but but it is extremely complex. Let's see, Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
Alderman Bosley, any questions? Alderman Odenberg, any questions?
No questions.
Why don't we do this, if you don't mind, I'm going to put this on hold for a minute, because I really think, Tom, were you able to get somebody from the comptroller's?
I represent to you that I spoke to the Comptroller, Executive Secretary, Shauna Martin, and she confirmed that Rob Droney reviewed this prior to the comptroller's approval.
And Rob is now with Smith Amundsen, so as Alderwoman pointed out, actually the answer to the original question was yes, it has been reviewed and it's in the fiscal notes.
Okay. Is everybody on the committee comfortable with that? Would they request or are comfortable with that, or would you rather have somebody from the comptroller's office down here? We can hold this and get somebody down here if we need to.
Mr. Chairman, I think that if there's a problem before it gets perfected, something happens, it could easily be put on the informal calendar for the sake of time.
Tom, why don't we do this? I think that's a good idea. Why don't we go ahead and have the comptroller send a note down acknowledging that they've reviewed that, and they can stick it in everybody's mailbox then, and we'll need that by, second readings on Friday. So that ought to be something that you can arrange, can't you? Okay.
All right.
Okay. With that, then, if there's no other questions on Board Bill number 138, the chair will entertain a motion for a due pass.
So moved.
Second.
Previous row.
Hearing no objection, we'll consider Board Bill number 138 passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Tom, why don't we go ahead and get to yours, then I guess you're down here for number 200, is that right? Do you want to step up and kind of walk through? This is,
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tom Ram with Armstrong Teasdale, and I drafted Board Bill number 200 before you at the request of the comptroller, and it terminates the special allocation funds for the Edison Brothers Warehouse and Center for Emerging Technologies for the reason that the note and bond that was outstanding has been retired, it's been paid for, so there's no further obligation under here. We can terminate these special allocation funds and distribute the money to the taxing authorities.
All right.
bit of good news there. Do we know, out of curiosity, how long it took to pay those two off?
Let's see, I got that here. The warehouse, the Edison Brothers Warehouse was issued in 1999 for $5.3 million, and then reissued in 2004 for 5.6. So that was a bump up in interest rate going down. So 2004 to 2017.
Okay, 13 years then.
Right, and then you've got the Center for Emerging Technologies was issued in 2000, was $978,000.
Okay, great. Bit of good news. Glad to see some of those paying
Yeah.
off. Are there any questions of Tom on this? Alderman Kennedy? No questions? Alderman Boyd?
Yeah, Tom, out of curiosity, you know how much revenue will start coming in after, since it's paid off?
I do not have, I don't know if Dale shows that. Dale, do you show these on these two on your chart?
I thought I saw.
Sorry,
Do you show, on your chart, do you show,
neither are on our chart because neither are celebrating a 5-year anniversary.
okay, I don't know, John. I can find out and let you know.
Okay, just curious, thank you.
Okay.
Well, ballpark, you can figure 10% of the principal amount and get you kind of close. So if it was 5 million, 10% would be 500,000.
500,000.
Yeah, and then on the other one, it was about $1 million. so-
Yeah, about $1 million, so.
So probably around $600,000 is a ballpark.
Good.
Okay. Let's see, did I stopped with Alderman Boyd. Okay, Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman Coulter stepped out. Alderman Ogilvy.
These buildings don't have anything to do with each other. We're just combining them into one. They're just two TIF notes that are being,
These two buildings, these two projects are
Yeah.
totally separate. One's down the street,
Right.
the other one's near Cortex.
there's just one bill to retire.
One bill, the subject matter being to retire,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, 10-4.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg.
No questions.
All right. Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 200 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous.
Okay. Hearing no objections, we'll, to previous rule, we'll consider Board Bill number 200 passed out with a due pass recommendation. Dale, I guess, is this you or Tom, 201?
No, it'll be me.
Oh, we have a committee sub on this one? Okay. Thank goodness for you keeping me on track. Before we get Dale started, I'd like to accept a motion to put the committee substitute before us. It attaches an exhibit that was inadvertently omitted when the bill was introduced.
So moved.
Second.
Previous roll.
Been moved and seconded, request for previous roll. Hearing no objection, we now have before us Board Bill number 201, committee substitute.
Is your attachment on an 8.5 by 11, or is it, I have it on a little bit larger, not that it's that much easier to read, but it might be easier to read in a little bit larger form. And first, let me say that the difference between the committee substitute and the original bill, the last 4 columns are columns that provide information supplied by the comptroller, and at the time that the bill was introduced, we didn't have all those numbers. So those last 4 numbers, and they're in bold, though even in the larger version, it's kind of hard to see that they're in bold compared with the rest of it. I just put them in bold because I thought it might be easier for you to tell those from what was in the original bill. But those are just the numbers that, and Matt Bauer, I don't know if you've met him, but he's a new member of our staff sitting back here, and he worked with Lisa Harmon at the comptroller's office to come up with those particular numbers. And they're fairly meaningful. But let me just go through it again, just stepping back. Every year, the state TIF statute asks us to do a number of things. And so this is a summary of what has been and is being done. The TIF statute requires first that the city hold a public hearing, which this is, to examine the projects that are celebrating a 5-year anniversary. So when projects celebrate their first 5-year anniversary, and then every 5 years after that, we hold a hearing, and the list that's attached, Exhibit A, are all the projects that are celebrating one of those anniversaries. If you look at the third column, it tells you which one. So none of them are celebrating 25 or 20-year anniversaries at this point, but a number of them are celebrating their 15th anniversary, their 10th anniversary, and then the bottom 5 are celebrating their 5th anniversary. Secondly, as required by the state statute, we need to place a notice in a newspaper of general circulation, and we always use this, the Daily Record, telling the public that this meeting was going to happen. So we published the last 4 Saturdays, the 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th, a notice that we would have this meeting today, and that we would have these 5-year anniversary projects before you. Also, the TIF statute requires that an annual statement regarding all the TIFs, sort of summarizing them all, be published, and that was published in the Daily Record on November 21st. And let's see, further, there's an annual, oh no, I'm sorry, yeah, no, that's right. The annual report for each TIF project has, that have not been dissolved is also published in the newspaper, and that was, oh no, I'm sorry, all the projects that have not been dissolved have an individual annual report that goes to the state. And there were 121 of those, and they're all due by November 15th, and they were prepared by SLDC and submitted by that date. As I said, 121 of them were submitted. A number of them it was for the first time, but almost all of them are obviously repeats. And that's on a form that the state provides for each of those. And the state puts it on their website, so anyone can see what the results are. You don't know if they've been posted yet. Yeah, I doubt if they've been posted yet for this year, but soon they probably will be. And that's something for TIFs throughout the state, so it's not unusual. So the projects that are on the 5-year list, I might just focus on those a little bit just so you kind of remember what they are. They're not all that old. The first one is 100 North Euclid. And you remember that is the apartment building known as the Orion, 177-unit apartment building, but it also includes 38,000 square feet of Whole Foods on the first floor. It was completed just a little over a year ago, but already you'll see on one of the columns that the information is provided, the comptroller, already over $500,000 has been placed in the payment in lieu of taxes, which are the pilots, and the economic activity taxes, the EATs, have been collected in that fund. So obviously it's doing well even in the short period that it's been around.
Well, if we could stop on that, just so we understand that, it looks like the original principal was $10 million. It says unpaid TIF principal, $10.2 million, so I presume is that accrued interest that?
Well, I think it's issuance costs and various things that go in there.
Okay, so then collected EATs and, so we, that, do we know if that's been amortized at all? Or?
I can't answer some of the questions that the comptroller probably knows all the answers to, but.
That was a privately placed TIF by Stern Brothers, so that those are the issuance costs that are in there. I can't tell you that it's been paid down because
It's down here.
it just was issued last year, so it's only had 1 year.
And 1 year before.
Right, yeah, one of the things, I actually spent quite a bit of time up in the comptroller's office with, I'm sorry, I can't remember the woman's name up there that does this.
Probably Lisa Harmon.
And we could really do a much better, Gerard's around, I mean, we could have him up there in an afternoon, he'd have this thing whipped up. You can play games with the interest rates and the amortization schedules so that, these, particularly the ones that are owner-held, we need to keep an eye on how that's being done, and where we're at on those things. I think we had a discussion with someone to kind of begin keeping an eye on that. So you can go ahead and adjust the interest. If the owner holds the note themselves, they can put an artificially high interest rate above it. The thing will never amortize, and they'll be able to go ahead and.
Okay, if it's a tax-exempt note, the interest rate is determined between 60 and 10 days before the issuance date.
So you have a third-party interest rate?
Yes, then you
Okay.
add 4% to it, so it comes in at 6s now.
Okay.
And if it's tax exempt, it's the interest rate, as I just said, to the 10,
Okay.
plus 2%. So it's a fixed amount. We can't.
Okay, so we're kind of watching that to make sure that we're not playing any.
That's written into the note ordinances.
Okay.
And on this particular case, it appears to me this note's been outstanding since like the end of last December, and it appears though they paid like $270,000 in the last column.
Okay.
If I'm looking at the right one.
Well, that says
the fourth-
payments of principal and interest, so we don't know which is which.
Well, they do, it's a super sinker, so they get whatever they get, they pay it down to get rid of the obligation as quickly as possible. There's really no amortization schedule in these at all, Joe. They pay.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if all the interest goes in and all they do is cover the interest expense, then it doesn't amortize at all, so.
Well, that's why they pay it all in to drive the principal down, because after they pay the interest amount, then they drive the principal amount down.
Right, well, I don't want to take up everybody's time with this, but if the interest amount if the amount collected is below what would be referred to as the constant, then you're not going to get, you're not going to get amortization.
You won't get any principal payment if your interest payment.
Yeah, and there's no way of telling from this fact sheet before us that whether or not things are getting amortized or not. Okay, I'm sorry, I wanted to pick on my projects, that was a project in my ward, so.
Well, the next one's your project, too. The next one's the one we just heard about in more detail, the St. Louis Innovation District. And as we just heard, there were 11 redevelopment project areas there. And 5 of those have been activated, so that means projects are going or about to go in each of those. There's one more, which again was just talked about, RPA 3, which is now before the TIF Commission, but a bill will be introduced into the Board of Aldermen in 2018 to take care of that. So there are a lot of projects that have been finished out there. There are a number of projects that are about to start. And they have, since its inception in 2013, which we just talked about, has resulted in almost $6 million in pilots and eats. So it's generating, obviously, a lot there, and I'm sure IKEA is a major part of that. The next project that's celebrating its 5th anniversary is the Mercedes dealership at Hampton and I-64. And it was completed in 2015 at the cost of about $13 million. And so far it's generated about $500,000 in pilots and eats. The last one on the list is Crondelet Coke, and that one is listed not as completed, but as partially completed. This is the 54-acre industrial park, or business park, down at River de Pere and the Mississippi River. It's known now as River City Business Park. And one speculative building has been built, 125,000 square feet. But there's an opportunity for another 4 buildings. The overall project is expected to have 650,000 square feet worth of buildings in it when it's completed. And it could reach $70 million. It's a Green Street project. So they're out actively looking for primarily industrial users, business users that would want to have a building built to suit for them. So that's still an ongoing project, although one building has been completed there. And the notes on that were just issued, so there isn't last month.
I don't think we necessarily need to go through all of these.
No, I wasn't going to go through them all.
I would say that.
I just went through the ones that are the 5-year ones.
Yeah, as a layperson looking at this, my interpretation of this is that it is column, 2, 3, 4, 5. Column 5 looks like it was the original TIF amount.
That's correct.
And then you go over to the 4th column from the right, and that's the unpaid TIF principal. And I would think that the difference between those two would be roughly reflective of the amount of principal that's paid off. And what could be done is you could have an amortization schedule for each of those things, compare that, the amount paid off to where it would be on an amortization schedule for, I don't know if you want to use 23 years or whatever, and then we could go ahead and figure out if it's ahead of schedule or behind schedule. And that's the type of thing that somebody in the comptroller's office ought to be able to do for us. And, some of these things, at least on paper here, appear to be negatively amortizing, which, it's just, this isn't, we kind of had this discussion last year, but I would, this is I guess a requirement of ours to go ahead and pass this out every year, but I just don't think this is as meaningful as it would be as if we actually knew what the amount of principal was paid off and where that would be relative to an amortization schedule.
Well, if you would shoot me an email, I'm sure we can expand this. Actually, it was expanded. You might remember that last year when I stood before you, it was a much smaller a piece of paper with just a few major items on it, and the committee asked if we could expand it, like the last 4 columns were not there before.
Okay.
So this is greatly expanded from what it had been in the past, but if you'd shoot me an email, I'm sure we can work with the comptroller to next year have even more columns or maybe more information that would be more meaningful.
Sure. Okay. Why don't we go through the committee here, and nothing that we're going to do is going to change how fast they're amortizing here. It's just that if we're going to do this exercise, we ought to actually have some meaningful information before us. Alderman Kennedy, do you have any other questions? Alderman Boyd, Alderwoman Davis.
I wanted to ask a question about this payment. I like what you asked. I don't know if I necessarily want to see all that, but I do know that you track whether or not the payments are on schedule in the comptroller's office.
Yes, ma'am.
Because you have notified me on some TIF projects that weren't up to par, and we had some conversations and letters, and one of them came close to us canceling the TIF. So you keep track of that, whether or not the payments are being,
We have a separate sheet that shows all the receipts and the expenditures, pilots and each broken down on each TIF
right.
twice a year.
So you want this that on this report for every project?
I'm sorry, what we,
I'm gonna get it.
I'm looking at the clock, and I'm
I
supposed to
know.
be somewhere in a little while, and I'm
I
trying to
know.
keep track of my
So you
time.
want the payment record on these projects, on all these projects?
It'd be nice if we, if we knew how much principal was paid, if we knew exactly how much principal was paid off. So if we have the original note, and then we know the outstanding balance, then we know how much principal's been paid off. Some of these things, actually, it appears as if they're negative amortizing, which
But they're
means
not,
that-
because you got fees and everything else involved here, so this looks about right for me.
There could be a negatively, I mean, that's
That
a
happens.
tip.
Yeah, it's a
because
tip.
You only get what you get out of the project if you're the developer.
Right. And,
Like
and
on the
of course, at the
GW
end, if it hasn't paid off its principal,
Right.
Then it just
it's the
falls off.
developer that holds the bag.
Yeah.
Maybe years and it's over.
Yeah, it's just
Right.
that,
Right.
the incentive, these have always been sold to us as being, a 10 to 15-year
Exactly.
target. If you
Exactly.
go ahead and you do a 125 debt service coverage, the idea is that we would, and,
Right.
I think it's important for us to kind of get some sort of macro view of whether or not our stuff is, if you have a negative amortizing TIF, now, you might be able to do that for a couple of years, but at some point, you need to start paying off principal, otherwise that thing's going to last for 23 years.
That's the understanding going in. It may be, the assumptions may have been incorrect when it was presented by the developer that it's going to pay in 15 or
Absolutely.
18 years, and it's never going to pay, but
That's why we need to go ahead, and that's why we're going through this whole exercise with having Jonathan down here, is we're wanting to get real numbers so that,
I understand.
But all that's just forecasting, and that's the if maybe. And so, in these development projects, things do turn out different, most especially the first 3 to 5 years. And we can't always be assured that we're going to get that. And a lot of them have they have a curve where they turn, and they're overperforming. I don't know if that's our role. I'm not being paid to be an auditor here.
Well, understand that this is a requirement of state law that we're trying to.
Oh, I know you track it. I know you do.
When you add on different things, we're more than willing to give you all information.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to continue to pile more stuff onto.
It's not going to do me any
A
good,
minimum
because unless I
requirement that
have the entire file before me, it does me no good to see all that additional stuff.
Right.
Because I am not the auditor, I am not the one handling that, and I don't follow it every week. You follow it every week or whatever, and then you tell me when it's in trouble, then that's when I react.
Okay.
So I don't know, I get worried sometimes that you may be asking for too much.
Well,
And I understand
I'm
where
comfortable
you're
with
at.
just if we just have the principal, that would be
Yeah,
a good start.
that's a good
And
start.
I think there's probably a way to pray this in a way, if we turn somebody like Gerard loose up there for
yeah.
an afternoon, we could go ahead and probably come up with something that would actually be more meaningful. But for right now, I don't think we just need to get, I don't need to get it out today, but we need to do this before the end of the year, don't we, in order to comply with state statute?
What I perceive here is being
Yeah,
presented
get
to you
this
is
resolution.
more than the minimum required by state law that has to be passed out.
Yeah.
The other things that you're asking for now would be in excess of.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
can go as it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Alderman Kotar, you just stepped back in, and you're probably
My
kind of
apologies.
wondering what the heck we're up to.
Triple booked myself
So I'll swing
today.
back to you and provide you a second shot at this. Alderman Ogilvy, do you have any questions?
So one question, so I assume the ones on this list that were terminated, they were on the 5-year list, but they had not been activated, or the project didn't happen. The incentive was authorized, but...
Yeah, the project didn't happen in a couple of cases, actually 3 cases. A different developer wound up buying the property, and they did develop it, but they didn't use TIF.
Okay. So those terminated TIFs, they won't be on the 15-year report 5 years from now. They've just disappeared.
Oh, they probably will. When they celebrate 15, they'll still be, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't really need to put them there. It's just that they are projects that are celebrating that anniversary.
Yeah, so I guess, and my other comment would be that Jonathan's gone, but I guess it's worth asking the question, you know, what do we learn from the progress of each of these, and have we incorporated, or can we incorporate, and this really isn't a question for you guys, just a comment, the actual performance, since we've got over 100 projects we could look at, into the actual performance of those projects compared to, you know, what Jonathan is now forecasting or what the financial analysis says. So I can't figure that out, but maybe maybe he can.
I'll mention it to him.
That's all.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No question.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg.
Do we submit this to the state, or is
No.
it just in
I mean,
lieu?
what we submit to the state is a much more detailed form for every one of the 121 projects. And that was submitted before the 15th. The requirement is only that we have a hearing and that we inform everyone of the ones that are having. There's no requirement that we send this to the state.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess that's it. If there's no other question, Alderman Kodar, did you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there are no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass Board Bill number 201 out of committee with the due pass. Committee substitute with a, let's see, we already have the committee, this always confuses me. We have the committee substitute already before us, so now we just vote on that. So I'll entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill 201 with committee substitute with the due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second, request for previous roll.
Previous roll.
Am I still
Oh,
on the
there's an
previous
objection, so,
Well, I'm not objecting if I'm still on the previous roll.
I don't believe you are, so we'll go
Okay,
ahead and have an
objection.
objection. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Kotar.
Aye.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
All right, we'll consider that passed out of committee with the due pass recommendation. Mary, I think, thanks for your patience. I think we're the last thing here, which is a form-based code. And, you know, 141. Why don't I say a couple introductory remarks? If there's no objection, I'll just handle it from here. One of the things that, when I first got elected, when we did development, not only did we require tax abatement, but we were actually requiring block grant money to do residential housing. And much of what I've tried to work on is, over the years, is to try to create an environment where development began more organically and, didn't require as much subsidy. And we are not out of the woods, but we are getting close to scratch development happening with some projects in the 17th Ward. One of the things that you will experience as your wards get to that point is one of the ways that we control the quality of development was through the use of incentives. In other words, somebody wants to do a project and, it's bad urban design, it's bad materials, it's a use that you're not really happy about, it could be any myriad of things. Well, right now, and we have that problem because our zoning code in the city is so old, and what we began thinking about a number of years ago is one of the attributes, I think, of living in the city is the density, and we talked earlier about smart growth and trying to get people in a more car-optional environment. So we began thinking about how to do that and what was required, and our zoning code is not a particularly effective vehicle to achieve that. And we began looking at how to better advertise and communicate and articulate our view of what those neighborhoods should be. So beginning, I don't know how long ago it was, Mary, maybe 10 years ago, we started working on this, and it took us a few years, and we did the first one in the Central West End, which was from a standpoint of market value, the highest market value in the 17th ward, and we felt that was the one area of our ward that was closest to having development occur without incentives, which meant that somebody could come in, do something, and no longer need the alderman's support through the use of tax abatement, and they could begin building lower quality of project. And so we started that then. We did that, and we did it in a way with the idea of trying to encourage the principles of smart growth, which includes density, multi-use occupancy of buildings with retail on the first floor and some other uses up above it. We achieved that. It took us a number of years. We did that about 5 years ago. Market values have continued to grow, in the West End. We are seeing some development occur, not a lot, but some development unassisted from the city. And we have actually experienced a couple uses that have popped in over there that we weren't real excited about. But the form-based code was there, and it's kind of helping us. It's not a perfect tool, and it's subject to, it's kind of a living document. You still have to make decisions sometimes, but now we have taken it to the next step, and we've jumped over the medical center in Cortex, and we've taken it down to the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood. Residents in that area have been working with the city to try to think about problems that we've had administering the previous code and some of the issues that the city had from a standpoint of bureaucracy or just tracking it and so forth, which I'm not terribly apprised of all of those issues, but Mary has been very patient in working with us as we try to understand, she and the planning department. But, Forest Park Southeast, we're hoping to prepare to the point where they're starting to get closer and closer to not needing, incentives on development over there. And we expect that over the next few years, we'll start seeing development occurring there. But for a farm-based code, it could end up resulting in, adverse uses or, poor building materials and so forth. And anyway, that is kind of the framework for this. It's all designed, and again, Forest Park Southeast, we've taken a very close look at it, trying to encourage density along Manchester with multiple uses, and trying to figure out how to connect that neighborhood to the new metro stop that's going in and so forth. So that's kind of the background on it. Mary, did you want to have something that you would care to add to that?
I just want to make sure I'm clear. Are we talking about Board Bill 141?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just looked here and I saw the form. This was one that we took off. Okay, forget everything I said, everyone. Okay. Well, tell us about the one that is 141. See, I had this in front of me. They had this up
191
here.
and 192.
Yeah.
191 is scratched. That was one of the one. Why did we have this here then?
91 we took off.
Okay.
And 192.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. So, but this version of your Forest Park Southeast Form-Based Code, is this the version you plan on, has this already passed, or do you plan on passing this?
I believe that, where are we at on that? That's gone through the Planning Commission, is that right?
Yes. So These went to the Planning Commission at their meeting in November, and it was introduced on the 17th. And then we need a 22-day period before we can hold a HUD's committee hearing. They just accidentally got put on the agenda for
I have
today.
some constituents downtown who are working with H3, very interested in the same thing, so I'm just going to share this with them. If we already have printed copies, I'll share.
I apologize to you. I'm sorry. I should pay more attention to what's going on down here, I guess.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us what 141 is then?
Okay, so 141 is a rezoning for a project in the Grove District with Green Street Development, and the developer is here also if they have any questions.
I like Green Street.
Yes, we like Green Street too. It's actually two different areas. One is in City Block 3957, where they've already done a mixed-use development on a parcel that was dual-zoned, and so they're just coming in and cleaning up the zoning for us now. And then the other part of this project is across the street on Sarah, facing on Shoto, where they're going to be rezoning 3 parcels to add to an existing parcel right on the corner, and they'll be doing some off-street parking there to benefit the existing development across the street, and then also to benefit the entertainment district there in the Grove. So it's just a simple rezoning.
Pretty cool.
Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions of the...
While they're here, can they tell us about this?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know what's
Brian,
going on.
you signed up. Would you care to talk about what's going in down there?
Good morning. Brian Pratt with Green Street. So the east side of Sarah is currently under construction for the Chroma project. It's a mixed-use development of 235 market-rate apartments. We have a 365-car parking garage and about 18,000 square feet of retail. We're also doing a full streetscape enhancement around the development and on Sarah Street. So that's the 4,000 to Shoto block, and that's the dual zoning that's getting cleaned up. Immediately west of Sarah at Shoto and Sarah, there was a ZX gas station that had been vacant for approximately 18 months. We acquired that, and then the properties requesting the rezoning from B to commercial, we recently acquired from a different property owner, and that took us a little longer than expected, but we got it done. So the rezoning will allow us to consolidate all of those properties, the ZX gas station and the 4 vacant properties, into one lot. And we'll be doing a surface parking lot, as Mary mentioned, to accommodate both our development and a future phase of that development, as well as to serve some of the overflow parking issues within the Grove District itself. And so the intent of that lot is to be a public access lot, not a privately held lot for any specific development in the district.
That's really great. Wow.
Okay, where's my sheet here? Alderman Kodar, any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy, any questions?
No.
Alderwoman Boyd, any questions?
No, great project.
Thank you. Alderman Bosley, any questions? Alderman Oldenburg, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out of committee Board Bill number 141.
So second, previous roll.
Moved and seconded at previous roll. No objection. We'll consider Board Bill 141 heard and passed out of committee.
Thank you.
That concludes our business for today. I have been trying to endeavor to meet with each of the committee members kind of one-on-one. A couple of you I have not met with. I would like to, meet you for lunch someday or at least after the board session sometime. And I want to make sure that you're getting what, we want to make this a meaningful experience for you down here, and we would like to go ahead and provide you an opportunity to, play a role in what we're doing, and I just want to better understand what your interests are. So we would be welcome that opportunity, and if I don't hear from you, I will reach out to you to try to schedule a time. Having no other business before us, I will consider today's meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your patience. And